Good morning, everybody, and welcome to Living Astrology with Janet Hickox. It's time to grab your cup of coffee or your tea, sit back and relax while we talk about what is happening up in the sky above us this morning, this week. It's a busy week, actually. Lots is happening, lots of aspects and patterns and things like that are occurring in the sky. And I wish I could show this to you right now. Maybe I can, but this morning I walked outside. It was just getting light, and I was outside and saw Mars, or what I thought was Mars, and the sky was pretty bright, right? The sun, it was setting, so it was setting in the uh, west. But I don't know if you guys can see this, but there we have Mars right there. That's what I would see in the sky. That line underneath here, this is the horizon line. So you could see Mars was setting. And by precessed astrology, Mars is actually in close to Gemini. It's moving backwards into Cancer. And this is the stars of the twins, Pollux and Castor. So I always get my little app out so I could validate whatever planet it is that I'm seeing. And indeed, I was seeing Mars. And it was bright and red, but also pretty far away. Um, Mars has seemed much closer at other times, but Mars's declination right now is out of bounds. So today we're going to be talking about what does an out of bounds Mars mean? And as well, Mars today retrogrades backwards into Cancer. So now we have a sign change happening with Martian energy. And then as well today, we have Mars at the beginning of a pattern. Uh, we don't talk about it often, but there are different aspect patterns or configuration patterns in astrology. And I'm going to show you this real quick. This pattern is called a locomotive, right? A locomotive, and it happens when all of the planets are following one another in the sky, and that a third of the chart is open. And even though this is the black moon Lilith and the nodes and the midheaven, things like that, these do not count, right? This part has to be empty of planets, and indeed it is. And what we see is Mars is the leader, right? He's the engine of this particular pattern. And the other bigger player this month or this week, especially, is Mercury, and Mercury is at the caboose. So, isn't that an interesting pattern to see? And some people have that pattern in their astrology charts and so forth. So, we're going to talk about what does it mean to be out of bounds as Mars, retrograde into a new sign as Mars, and at the head, the engine, if you will, of a locomotive pattern. And then we've got other things going on. Mercury in a square to Neptune today, and as well, Mercury changing signs on Wednesday. Literally, I think that's all we're going to have time for. We'll see what happens as we go on. But good morning to all of you who are showing up here this morning. I saw Julie out there and Pam Z. Good morning to you. Diana, hello. She says, chill in the air in New Orleans. Wind chill is 28 degrees. That's hysterically funny because a few years back, I went to New Orleans on New Year's Eve. Actually, we arrived the 28th or something of December, and we were in an Airbnb house, and our pipes froze in the house because it was down to like 25. I don't know. It was cold. And we hadn't really brought clothes for that kind of weather in New Orleans because we thought we would be in 60-degree weather, which, for us would have been nice. It was crazy. So here you go. You're having another one of those times. Wrap your pipes, right? Good morning, Joan Durchie. Good morning, J-Lo. Good morning, Kamal. It's good to have you with us. Amy D, good morning. She says she's glad to be back live today. Well, we're glad to have you back. Tom W, hello to you. He says he saw Mars last night at the Gemini rising in the east. I thought it was up because it was not red. Oh, you thought it was Jupiter because it was not red. I gotcha. Um, I think when it's lower to the horizon, it's harder to see the red because it's picking up the glare of the sun. and the glare of the sun is distinctly yellowish orange, so we get kind of a different color there. Good morning, Narges. Good morning, Colleen. It is great to have you all joining us this morning. So let's dive in, shall we? So today we have Mars retrograding, moving backwards, which he's been moving backwards, nothing new there. But today he shifts out of Leo, where he has been moving backwards, and into the sign of Cancer. And as I pulled the chart this morning, actually, Mars was still in. No, Mars had already shifted. He was at 2956 of Cancer. So this must have happened very early in the morning. And what does Mars retrograde in Cancer? How does that change up the energies of what we've been experiencing? And the energy shift here moves from the very leonine self expression, individuality, energy back to more of the emotional security, family dynamics, personal boundaries kind of energy. It's very emotional energy. Cancer is a water sign. And the theme, anytime we have a planet retrograde, is that we're kind of moving backwards or we're able to move inward. And moving inward here with Mars retrograde in Cancer might be about emotionally reassessing what is happening in your life. So, because Cancer is deeply emotional, but also nurturing, Mars retrograde here might urge us all to reevaluate our motivations, especially around emotional reactions within our families, our family responsibilities. Why or how are we taking on the things that we're taking on? And how do we nurture ourselves and others? It's a very big pattern shift here. And old emotional wounds, consequently, might rise to the surface, giving us an opportunity to heal, but also to release the past and past grievances, right? Things that we've been holding on to. And this becomes an energy redirection, if you will, because Mars typically is representing drive and action and assertiveness. And in retrograde, the energy turns inward and it slows down all of the external pursuits that we might have. And then we focus more on introspection. Well, in Cancer, this could manifest as a need to retreat and to recharge, to prioritize things like self care and self nurturing and self love. And then also asking us to re-look at how or redefine how we approach emotionally charged situations, right? Are we sensitive? Do we hold back? Do we charge right on in and, create more drama and uproar within our relationships? And of course, this is family and home energy. So it's probably more focused at the home or the relationships you have with your family members. And this transit can stir up things that are unresolved within your family dynamics. And it also highlights the needs for us to have stronger boundaries, right? In Cancer is sometimes lacking boundaries, let's say, right? Cancer energy is mothering energy. It is nurturing energy, and how far does that nurturing go? Does it become mothering as opposed to just mothering or nurturing? So we have to watch out how it is that we are interacting with those people in our lives. So essentially, we're not taking over, right, the responsibility for those people, but we're also not neglecting them, right? So it's a balance that we're needing to strike. And there is this need during this period of time for emotional strength and for courage. It really calls forth this courage that we need in order to face our vulnerabilities, those sore spots or those weak spots that we have within us. And then it also asks us to be more sensitive when we approach conflicts, or rather than being aggressive, or on the other side, being passive aggressive, be very sensitive and try to cut through the middle of issues so that you're not, stabbing people behind the back, but you're also not like right in their face confrontationally. You're just kind of being more emotionally intelligent than that, right? This is about emotional intelligence during this period of time. Now, Cancer's indirect communication style, remember, it's the crab. When you watch a crab on the beach, he kind of sidles into something. He doesn't necessarily walk straight at you. He's kind of moves that big claw perhaps towards you, and that's kind of sideways. and it's a protective stance. It's defensive, right? Cancer is a much more defensive sign. And with Mars retrograde, we might have more of the passive aggressive energies. And frustration can mount because we can't quite get to where we want to go, or we can't quite bring up what it is we want to bring up. So we can't quite express our needs clearly, effectively with others. So watch out for frustration during these next few weeks, or during, quite the while here, actually, all the way to February 23rd when he turns direct. He'll be in Cancer. Don't be disturbed as well if you have low energy or low motivation. I was doing that check in with myself yesterday, having the same conversation with myself because I was feeling like unmotivated, tired. Like I did not really want to get up and do anything, which is not like me on the weekend. I'm usually puttering around and doing all kinds of things, right? I just didn't feel like doing it. And I realized, oh, hey, you have Mars in Leo, so that means you're closing in on a Mars return at some point further into 2025, but still coming into that, the energy is waning, right? So all of you are going to be in some part of your Martian cycle, and you may be feeling less apt to do anything at this point in time, which actually is protective in a way, right? Because actions moving forward that you would take at this time might not turn out the way that you thought. They might not have any kind of legs, right, to it that keeps it going, that is in any way sustainable, because the energy is so different at this moment. So it's a time to focus on rest. It's a time to focus on reflecting on things that you want to do and on your relationships. And yet, emotions can run very high with Mars retrograde in Cancer, especially if those feelings have been being suppressed. And we can see that then becoming volatile, and that can lead to outbursts or overreacting to perceived slights from others. Now, I'm talking about this interpersonally, but this is also a collective energy. And it could be, possibly what's prompting some of these very demonstrative, volatile outbreaks of violence, right? Not only the Leo energy being fire energy, but Cancer energy now being frustrated at not getting one's needs met. So, what do we do? Well, first of all, we can focus on healing during this period of time. So, from now until the end of February and even beyond that, it might not even be until April, that March, that we get that Martian energy back into Leo. So we have this long-term transit now of this energy in Cancer. So use this turn or this time to nurture yourself emotionally, and to process past pain, and to reconnect with what feels safe and so comforting and sort of safe or secure, right? Those are the big key things about Cancer. And strengthen your foundations at this period of time, right? Grow those roots deeper. Take a look at where the weak spots are in your relationships or in your life in general, because it's an excellent time to do things like decluttering, right? I should share the picture of my daughter tearing apart her pantry over the weekend. And I don't know how she had so much stuff in there, but it was everywhere. And I walked into the house, and every surface was covered with things that were from the pantry. And she had to establish a pattern, an organization in her pantry. So this is a part of the decluttering process, right? Reorganizing, reimagining, and specifically your living space, right? And how that impacts you. Practice emotional intelligence. When you get triggered, practice responding instead of reacting. Channel frustration that might be coming up into a sort of constructive outlet, like journaling or art or other physical activities. Revisit old projects. So if Cancer has a connection to the past, because it's ruled by the moon, right? And the moon takes us through different phases of life and different phases at different times. It's rhythmic. And so Cancer's connection to the past kind of aligns with Mars retrograde's introspective energy. So, pick up any projects that you'd been working on in the past that maybe you left unfinished for whatever reason, and play with that, right? Do things that are open to you instead of getting frustrated by trying to do things that are not open to you at this point in time. Collectively, when I look at the collective here, because this is a long-term transit, we may be experiencing these things over the long term. And when I say long term, I mean, we've been dealing with this Mars energy since about September when he first entered the zone of the retrograde, then when he turned retrograde, and then is now changing signs in the retrograde. And then when he goes forward, he'll still be in that retrograde zone all the way through, I believe it is the end of April. So this is a long term transit, as it always is when we're dealing with a Mars retrograde. So we have societal issues then that we might be dealing with that are related to housing, that are related to the family and what does it mean to be a family, and emotional well-being. So that brings in perhaps even issues around mental health, and the emphasis will likely be on healing collective wounds around safety and security. Sorry, I usually drink water before I start, and I didn't. So we have a collective impact that is going to be focused in some very uh, difficult areas perhaps for people. And Mars is also out of bounds at this point of time. So remember, what does it mean to be out of bounds? So all the planets are in something called a declination. And the declination is in respect to their relationship with the sun. And the furthest the sun ever moves from the position or the point of view of the Earth is to 23.44 degrees. And that's because that's what the Earth's tilt is, right? And any planet that goes beyond that in relation to the ecliptic plane is called out of bounds. And an out of bounds planet is more extreme in its expression, right? It has more bang, more boom to it. So when Mars is out of bounds, it travels beyond the sun's maximum declination, which is 23.44, north or south of the celestial equator, right? We have a north and we also have the south. It can move either way. And its energy takes on that unpredictable, intense, and independent quality. He acts not the way that we would expect him to act, or he acts more extremely than what we would expect. Any planet does, by the way. And right now, Mars is at 24.6 degrees north. So he's north of the celestial equator and he's beyond the 23.44 degrees. So he is operating outside the lines, right? Martian energy. He's outside the lines of his normal behavior. So it amplifies his influence and in unique ways, sometimes ways that are like, geez, how did that happen kind of thing, right? And now that he is going to be in retrograde in Cancer, that is going to be a shift in the energy because now he's out of bounds, but in a different sign. Okay. So there's that. And we're going to talk now about how Mars' out of bounds status can amplify the energy of his transit. But first, I want to take a look and see if there are any questions. Good morning, Asa. It's good to have you out there. Pam Z says Mars, old action to new, water aerobics this morning. That's awesome. Man, I've missed water the last few years, even with all my chart water. Good morning to Christine. Good morning, Debbie Tibbetts Tumiel. 18 watching and only 9 likes. All right, you other, there's 19 now, so let's get 10 more likes, please. Thumbs up, hearts, etc. On the video. Good morning, Peggy Ann Mulcahy. And J-Lo says, OMG, Janet, my voice is the same. Is it Mars? I am progressed in Gemini. I'm thinking for me, it's more like Mercury in that square to Neptune, right? The foggy feeling, not being able to be clear. And since I am a Gemini, Mercury, my ruling planet, yeah, and Mercury in Sagittarius opposing, actually today opposing my natal sun. Oh, yikes, right? 27, 28 degrees of Sagittarius, and my sun sits at 28 degrees of Gemini. So, yeah, there's where it is. And because you're a progressed Gemini, I don't know how far into Gemini you're progressed, but it could be affecting you that way as well. Okay. And Debbie Tippett's Tubular has a frog voice also. And I'm wondering, because it's winter, at least here in the Northern Hemisphere, and we're inside more frequently, we have heaters running because it's cold. And you guys on the east side of the country, far more cold than you're used to. And like coming out of the blue when it's been sort of a mild winter thus far. Um, it, happens, right? Allergies. Lo says it's snowing where she is. I just woke up like this. Now I have to check my chart. Good girl. Check your chart. Okay, let's go back to how Mars out of bounds intensifies the energy that we're experiencing right now. So, the first thing that we can expect is heightened emotion driven actions. So, it's not surprising if we see, people acting outside of the norms right now. And in Cancer, a sign that's deeply connected to emotional energy, the out of bounds Mars amplifies that reactive tendency that Mars has, right? It is Mars literally in our charts that causes us to react versus respond. So when Mars is in a sign that is emotional, any water sign, so any Cancer, Scorpio, Pisces energy, he's going to amplify that emotional energy, the sensitivity to things that people say, or bringing feelings that we thought we'd handled up to the surface. So, especially when it comes to with Cancer being the sign, our family, security, or personal boundaries. So, expect exaggerated emotional responses and possibly even unconventional ways of dealing with conflict. That would be a good thing if we, dealt with conflict in a peaceful manner. Wow, wouldn't that be surprising? Out of bounds planets break traditions. Say that 10 times fast. And the traditional patterns are upset when a planet is operating out of bounds. So Mars in this position might inspire unconventional strategies or solutions to problems that are in the home, right? Or in the homeland, right? Our homeland here, especially when it's tied to family dynamics or home life or emotional healing and well-being, that type of thing. But actions may seem out of character for some people, both for individuals and for society, as Mars explores those bold and sometimes atypical routes of expression, right? That's Mars. And there can be amplified um, energies around drive and ambition because this is a Martian energy to begin with. But in retrograde, those actions are slowed, right? We might have a lot of ambition and we might feel this drive and passion to do something. And actually, it's funny because this week the earth is in the gate of starting things and the sun is in the gate of ambition and drive. So it's like this double dose, perhaps, of wanting to get going, but your foot is on the brake and you can't really get anything, up and running. So being out of bounds might be a good counterbalance with bursts of energy. Then we go back into rest and another burst of energy, and then we go back into rest. So it could, manifest that way where we're moving ahead, but almost imperceptibly at first, because that going ahead is followed by a going backwards a step, right? So what is that? Two steps forward, one step back kind of energy. But also in Cancer, this can also be expressing itself in fierce protectiveness, or especially over our loved ones, or a drive to secure emotional safety. So feeling threatened by different things, even if it's real or imagined, right? So that adds some volatility to this whole week and to this whole time going forward here for a while. Mars out of bounds often correlates with a willingness to take risks or to defy the norm. So we also have to watch out for that. And those risks might involve emotional vulnerability or dramatic actions that are in response to a perceived threat. So interesting, right? So be mindful of your impulsive decisions. Try to stay on an even keel, um, because if you take impulsive action, it might not actually align over time with what was the actual truth of what was happening. So we have to be very careful. But the key themes during this period of time with out of bounds Mars are going to be very similar to Mars in Cancer, and that is emotional courage being needed. Protective instincts are in a bit of an overdrive during this period of time. There's this strong instinct to protect, which is what I think gets us into trouble here, leads us into mothering rather than just teaching someone how to care for themselves or how to be accountable for their own actions. Right? We can't take over someone. We have to be able to live side by side with someone. It is disruptive energy to be sure, but it is also transformational, and we already know this is the year of the phoenix, right? This whole idea of things that are going to change, burn us down, and then our need to rise from those ashes. So while Mars in out of bounds may challenge conventional wisdom or routines, and that as a disruption to what feels stable, the disruption often leads us to grow, right? It gets us outside of the comfort zone that we've gotten accustomed to, and then allows us to be creative in our problem solving, right? To look and see things differently, right? In a sort of inventive way, perhaps, especially with Pluto and Aquarius at the same time, and Mars and Pluto still in somewhat of an opposition and out of sign opposition, right? Because now Mars is in Cancer, Pluto is in Aquarius, but still like 1 degree away from one another. And it can lead to, doing things in some extraordinary ways, right? So if we look for the high, then we can see the high. If we look for the low, we're probably going to see the low. So watch the news cycle too. Watch how the drama amps up, or something big happens and it doesn't get, top billing. It should be really interesting for these next several weeks to be sure. So tips for navigating this energy are very similar to the ones that would be for navigating Cancer energy. Practice regulating your emotions. Try to stay in response versus reaction. Channel that Martian frustration into creative outlets or into constructive outlets, right? Doing something with that energy. It's funny because over the weekend, as I was sitting there feeling like I didn't want to do anything, what I wanted to do was go outside and start straightening up my garden and my porch, but wouldn't stop raining. Like my efforts, my dreams, my idea, my hope was being dashed by the weather, and that was even more frustrating, along with the fact that the one thing I really felt like I wanted to do wasn't available for me to do. And that is probably going to be the way it goes for the next several weeks. So we just need to be okay with what it is that we're experiencing, because otherwise we get into emotional reactions. Be cautious with risks, right? Don't I want you to be bold, and I want you to be able to do things in new and unconventional ways, but I don't want you doing it at a risk to your own health or your own wealth or your own wisdom, right? Don't do things that are crazy, and embrace the unconventional, right? Just do it a different way, right? Be different. Dare to be different. It is, a time for us to be able to do that. Out of bounds energy kind of thrives on breaking the mold, right? Jumping out, doing it differently. So, on a societal level, this could bring dramatic, unexpected events related to Cancerian themes of family and structure within the family, housing, emotional well being, real estate, things like that. There might also be a focus on breaking free from the traditional norms that we have adhered to, and breaking free from those systems that no longer serve the collective. And Mars's out of bounds journey invites us to explore and to embrace a bit wilder, freer expression of our desires and emotions, but it also asks us for mindfulness to harness its power constructively, not willy nilly, right? Not crazy like. Now, as if that isn't enough about Mars, I led off this morning with some of you might not have been there yet, so I'm going to show this picture once more. Mars, in astrology, we have different patterns that show up in a chart. right? And like some people have kites in their charts or mystic rectangles, or they have a pattern called a seesaw or a bundle and blah, 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 right? Lots of different words that talk about the different patterns. Well, right, there's a pattern that is called a locomotive. It's a train, right? And what it is a time when the planets are all within about, 2/3 of the chart, and then that leaves a third of the chart open without any planets. And then there's always one planet that is in the lead, the engine, if you will, of the locomotive or the train. And then there is a planet that's at the caboose, right? The end of the train that marks the end. So here's what it looks like today. This is our locomotive. And up at the top right there, you see the engine, and the engine is Mars retrograde. And then if we look at the caboose, if we go down through all the different planets, you see all the planets there, Jupiter and Uranus and Chiron, Moon, Neptune, Mars, or not Mars, Saturn, Venus, Pluto, the Sun, and then the very last planet there is Mercury. And even though we do have some points over here in this empty side, there aren't any planets there, right? We have Black Moon Lilith there. That is a mathematically contrived piece. The nodes don't count. There's a midheaven and the part of fortune and the vertex. No planets. So this is a locomotive chart with Mars as the engine and Mercury as the caboose. So what does all that mean, right? So with Mars as the lead planet in this pattern, it's amplified, right? His job is already amplified. He's the little engine that could. And it's a dominant influence during this whole time period, right? The fact that he's retrograde, the fact that he's out of bounds, and now the fact that he's the lead planet with likely no other planet going to overtake him in the very near future, right? And this pattern is holding for the next several weeks, actually longer than that, and a couple of months, right? From now until February 23rd is still just about 2 months, right? A little less. And the energy of a locomotive is that there's a planet that's in the lead that's driving sort of the rest of the energies of the planets behind. And then we'll talk about Mercury, that is the caboose, as we get to the end of this part. So a locomotive pattern occurs when we have all of those planets that are within 2/3 of the chart with an empty space, a gap, if you will, right? In the remaining 1/3 of the chart. And the lead planet in this is the one, if you're looking at your own chart, for example, to see, if you have this in your chart, the lead planet is the one that you would come to first by moving clockwise instead of counterclockwise. Damn it, I'm backwards. So here we go. Here's, if you start clockwise from the ascendant, and the first planet you come to is Mars, where typically we would go this way, counterclockwise. That's how the planets move. But in order to find the leader of the pack, we need to go counterclockwise. And the only planet that we come to is Mars. So Mars is the first in this line of planets, right? That's how I got that. So we have this sort of outsized role of Mars right now. So it's worth taking the time to talk all about this because it is so prominent in our experience of these first couple of months of the year. So Mars sets the tone then for how the energy moves through this pattern. As the lead planet, then he is embodying the starting point for all action, focus, and motivation for these next couple of months. In Cancer, which is where he is in the lead in this right now, it means emotions, it means intuition, it means safety or security issues that are in the forefront of decision making. And the retrograde motion suggests that introspective or indirect style of leadership perhaps is what we'll be seeing, focusing on reassessment and rebalancing of the energies. But there's also this emotional drive that's going on behind the scenes with everyone. I can't even tell you how many clients I've heard from where they're experiencing this emotional drive, emotional issues coming up, wounds being triggered, and all of that. So this is partly responsible for this, that and the fact that Chiron, the planet, the wounded healer, is in the sign of Aries, a sign that Mars rules. So we have this sort of feedback loop that's going on about healing around Martian themes and Cancer themes, right? Emotions and action, emotions and actions. So Mars in retrograde in Cancer leads with instincts, feelings, emotions, and also personal needs, right? Thinking more about, what is it that I need? And there's a collective emphasis perhaps that we should see, that we might start seeing soon, about acting from the heart rather than from logic. Like logic is a mind orientation, not an emotional orientation. And it might lead to breakthroughs, but it might also lead to emotional turbulence, right? As we move our way out of the logical mind into the heart mind. And that leads us to unpredictable energy. So Mars at the leader here is out of bounds, and it makes this even a wilder ride, right? It's almost like a runaway freight train. That's what it kind of feels like to me. And it's pushing this locomotive energy into unexpected territory, or into unorthodox territory, right? Actions and motivations may seem scattered or reactive to us, but ultimately are guided by a deeper emotional undercurrent, something else pushing from underneath the surface. And it can also be a catalyst for transformational energy. As the locomotive lead, Mars retrograde becomes a key player in spurring necessary change, especially regarding home and family, the homeland, right? If we want to look at it collectively, the USA is a Cancer ruled country, and personal security and growth and nurturing and all of our family ties and all of those things are highlighted, right? And the importance of looking backward, retrograde, before moving forward to make sure that we're making the right choices, that we're not reactive in our choices, that we're not responding out of fear or out of a lack of feeling secure, or that someone else is going to take all our toys. Right? Someone else is going to steal all our jobs. These are themes we're already seeing out there in the world. So it's a time for us to tie up loose ends and to reassess our past actions in order to prepare ourselves for Mars's eventual push forward. And that, of course, doesn't happen until after February 23rd. So, what challenges are going to, be apparent in this pattern, in this longer term pattern? We're going to see overreaction. We're going to see overprotection, right? That Cancer protective energy could lead people to emotional outbursts or an overzealous desire to fix the problem rather than thinking it through and making sure the steps are emotionally aligned with what we want. We might just be overreactive and we just, move the chess pieces on the board much too fast and we pay the price for it later. Sometimes, in order to fix a situation, we do it at the expense of balance or perspective, right? During this kind of transit. There could also be stalled momentum, the exact opposite of what we really want, which is moving forward. Things can get stalled, slowed down, blocked, right? A landslide blocks the train tracks, and now the locomotive can't go anywhere. And frustration may arise, right? Especially as people feel like their emotional efforts aren't yielding immediate truths or immediate results, right? So we can get frustrated and we act badly from that frustrated energy. We can also become very sensitive to criticism during this period of time. Mars tends to internalize criticism here in Cancer. And as the lead planet, this energy could permeate collective dynamics, right? The collective making people overly defensive, overly in a conflict mood, right? Ready to use that Cancer pincher in very strong ways. So we have to learn how to harness this energy. We have to let emotions guide us, not rule us, right? This is a huge test of this this evolutionary leap that will occur in 2 years in our human design, right? So we are letting our emotions guide us, but not rule us. And while emotions are the engine here with Mars in Cancer retrograde, focus on channeling them constructively rather than letting them control your responses or your actions, right? In order to be in response, you have to actually take time. You have to be a little more patient. Maybe breathe a few times before you say or do anything that you might regret later. Slow down and reflect. Retrogrades always invite sort of introspection, right? And with Mars leading, this is a time to reconsider what truly motivates you to take action and what's really truly um, available for you to take action on that aligns with your hopes and your dreams. Find balance in the leadership styles that you are a leader in or a group that you're a leader of, and adding maybe some empathy and some patience to that, right? That's sorely lacking in the political landscape that we're in. And I know that's tough to see, but it is the one thing we need to grow more of: empathy and compassion. And then tap into Cancer's creativity. It is a water sign, so there is a lot of creative energy available. So use this period of time to innovate in areas like your home life, your family connections, self care and nurturing, growing, learning. Cancer is also the sign where we teach our children. So, what are we teaching? And then, as well, what are we learning? And that can help create some stability while Mars is in this out of bounds, leader of the pack, retrograde energy. So, yay, right? We have so much going on with Mars. And so it almost begs the question, where is Cancer in your own chart? Right? That house that Cancer is in is the focal point of all this Martian energy, the out of bounds, the leader of the pack, and in retrograde. So, look at that house and decide, go back and find out, what is that house all about? Right? In my chart, I have a Cancer rising, so Cancer is at my first house. It's going to be all about the self. If it's in your second house, it's going to be about your resources and your earning power and your self-worth. If it's in your third house, it's going to be about the mind, your thinking, your communication, your listening abilities. Fourth house, it's going to be about home. It's going to build up that Cancerian energy. It's going to be a home and family and safety and security and all of that heightened, right? Because of the energy of Cancer being where Mars is, and it being in the house ruled by the moon, emotions, right? If it's the fifth house, it's about your creativity, where you find joy, and maybe even in your family relations, your children specifically. Sixth house would be about your work and where you work, your environment, and the body's relative health. So it's health and well-being focused. Seventh house would be about your relationships, your marriage, your contracts between you and others, your business partnerships. If in the eighth house, it's going to be about renewal and regeneration and all of that, how that comes from a death and a rebirth. It is also the house of other people's money. So it might relate to debt and credit or money coming to you from other places like your spouse or grants, credit, things like that. Ninth house, your higher perspective, right? Seeing things from that higher perspective, your higher self, your higher power. 10th house is going to be affecting your career, your profession, how the world sees you. The 11th house, your hopes, your dreams, your wishes, your connection to friends and to different groups. And in the 12th house, it's going to be your relationship to your inner self, your inner world. And what are those prisons of self making looking like? And how can you deal with that and release yourself from those chains that bind? So it gives you just kind of this idea of what area of life that this might be impacting you. And it has been impacting you for a while, right? We're moving from the Leo house that you have down now to back to the Cancer house. So that's why, things are changing from place to place for you personally. All right. Let's see here. I got to go back. Yeah, I know Terry loves this chart. I laughed this morning, Tom. I actually showed him the chart ahead of time and said, "Look, I get to talk about trains this morning." And he laughed. And actually, I was listening to his trains in the background anyway. Um, mm, Round these parts, we call them choo-choos, Thomas the Tank Engine. And then Christine has that theme song now stuck in her head. We are all going to have that. Good morning, MD, and good morning. Or Christine says, Ozzy Osbourne, Crazy Train comes to mind. I love that. That's perfect. And City of New Orleans by Arlo Guthrie, Tom says. So, yeah, this is great stuff. And J-Lo says, we have an exact Sun Saturn opposition right now. Yay, right? TD Hawk, good morning. Good to see you. Tom Guthrie is great. Lots LOL, good pun. Okay, good. So no questions. Lots of great comments though. All right, so let's go into something different now. So we talked about Mars a lot and about being the leader of the pack, right? He's the leader, but Mercury is the caboose, right? And Mercury today is in a square to Neptune. So Mercury in Sag is in a square to Neptune in Pisces. And what is all of that? So, what this combines is Mercury's quest for truth and clarity with Neptune's dreamy, illusionary, and transcendental nature in Pisces, that foggy feeling, right? We can't see straight. So, depending on how the energy is navigated, how we respond to the energies, the resulting tension from the square can be both creative and imagination, right? Fantasy, things really being triggered in us as an imagination goes, but also being fraught with confusion. Neptune in Pisces, confusion. So, some of the themes we may have foggy communication going on today, or froggy communication. I like the way that works too. Mercury in Sagittarius wants directness, bluntness, even honesty, but Neptune blurs the lines. I heard that song, Blurred Lines, on the way to my daughter's yesterday. And that can lead us to misunderstandings or to miscommunication or even outright deception, intentional or not, right? It's there. So be cautious about jumping to conclusions about anything you hear. Um, don't believe everything you hear because likely there is some deception or something that's not quite clear that's behind all of that. It does heighten our creativity, though, and our imagination. So the transit fuels storytelling. Mars is in the gate of storytelling, by the way, in our human design right now, and amps up the stories. What are the stories? Is the story true? And it also amps up our visionary thinking. So we have some, being some ability to see things in a different way. But we may also struggle with the details and the practicality of those ideas. We may be trying to apply a lot of logical reasoning. Mercury is the sign that rules logic, or the planet that rules logic. But logical reasoning might be hard to come by with Neptune involved in the square. We also will have truth versus illusion. What's real, what's not, right? Sagittarius and Pisces both deal with big picture themes, right? Jupiter is the ruler of Sagittarius, but also he is the more traditional ruler of Pisces, right? There's this idea of this biggerness, right? That means that we are dealing with philosophy, perhaps. We're dealing with faith, the meaning of life, the meaning of our very existence, right? So this transit between Mercury and Neptune can really trigger or spark a profound questioning, but also profound insights coming to us as we move through this energy today. But it can also create mental fatigue as you're trying to perhaps think your way through conflict, and concentration and mental clarity may feel elusive right now with Neptune involved in this. So, overthinking on one side or escapism on the other side, the extremes of a Mercury square Neptune, maybe through daydreaming or creative avoidance, things like that. So, we have to somewhat come in the middle, giving ourselves time both for the dream, but also for the work involved in mental processing. But this is also maybe time for spiritual exploration, right? Neptune in Pisces has already had this open invitation for us to explore our spirit, to look at spiritual growth and themes of our higher self, our collective universal love, universal coming together, our idea of unity, all of this. And now combined with Mercury's Sagittarius energy, maybe it's a powerful time to explore your personal beliefs, higher truths, mystical teachings, right? Go into spirit. But we do have to watch for deception. That is always a possibility when Neptune is involved, whether it's intentional or whether it is the perpetuating of a lie. It's possible, right? So we have to be very discerning in our listening to information and diving a little deeper, perhaps, to find what's actually true. Double check facts and avoid signing contracts or making major decisions if clarity is lacking, especially for the next few days, right? This will wane as time goes on. Beware of overwhelm because Neptune can overwhelm Mercury with too much abstractness or too many emotional inputs, especially now with Mars and Cancer. So ground yourself with some practical tasks to stay balanced, right? Time for dreaming, but time for washing the dishes, right? Both need to be taken care of. Guard against overpromising. Mercury in Sagittarius is very much optimistic, right? It is very good at seeing the future in terms of the bright side of things. And that can prompt us to say yes to everything, right? We assume that we're going to have that energy, we're going to have those funds, we're going to have that ability by a certain time. And so we say yes to things that perhaps we should not have said yes to. So don't overestimate your capacity to do anything, to spend time on things, to spend money on things. Commit yourself very carefully over these next couple of days. Now, on the upside, we have increased access to intuition. So listen to your inner voice. We have access to creative inspiration. But again, make sure that you're not inspired by other people's ideas and thoughts, right? That you have this true inspiration. But writers and artists and musicians might find these couple of days to be incredibly creative, which is so cool because today I actually start writing for the 2026 almanac. Today's the day. Let your imagination roam free, but remember to revisit your work later to make sure you didn't make a mistake, right? Or that you do some practical editing. Our compassion and our feelings for each other, our understanding is also, kind of upgraded during this period of time. This is a time for listening to others, right? Not just speaking. So listen to what is happening with your fellow human beings. And then let's talk about Mercury as the final planet in this locomotive pattern, because I suspected that there was more meaning behind this because you in a train, of course, we have the engine at the front pulling the load and the caboose that marks the ending of that train. And in this case, Mercury in Sagittarius is a key role or has a key role in gathering and integrating the lessons of all of the other planets, right? He's cleaning up, he's batting forth, right? He is the final integration of whatever is going on with the actions of Mars, following through to the rebellion and revolutionary energy of Uranus, Jupiter's growth and magnetism, and then on through Saturn's constriction and Venus and love and value, and on through all the other planets, right? So, as the caboose, if you will, Mercury synthesizes and then communicates the overarching themes of the locomotive's energy, right? Like the train having a specific theme, like the Polar Express, right? Or there's the Alaskan trains, things like that, that have themes that go with the train. And its placement, Mercury's placement in Sagittarius, means that we are looking for deeper meaning in all of this as well. We're looking at big picture, right? Seeing the bigger picture. We want honesty. And the idea of philosophy is central to making sense of what's going on with the collective at this point in time. There's also spiritual messaging here with Neptune squaring this caboose. There's a deeper intuitive layer going on with Mercury's passage here. And this might manifest in us as an urge to connect logic with faith and or transcendence, Neptune. As the last planet in the train, Mercury in Sagittarius may feel the pressure to make sense of the locomotive's driving themes. And it might be very difficult to make sense of anything right now with the square to Neptune. So we might have to look to Mercury as, a piece of the truth that's there, but it's murky. We don't quite see it clearly. That doesn't make it not meaningful. It just means we have to look a little deeper because Mercury isn't going to be the caboose for this entire time, right? He's the caboose right now, but he moves faster than all those other planets. So he begins to take whatever the messaging is, whatever his takeaway is of what is happening with the train at this point, or the locomotive at this point, and he's going to start peppering all of the other planets with that information as he moves through. Right. So if I look at this chart, then it would be likely the sun that ends up being the caboose at some point here in the next couple of weeks. But for right now, Mercury is there. And it is also as the closer of the train, if you will. The collective energy is about embracing curiosity, seeking wisdom, navigating Neptune's illusions, and doing that with compassion, but also discernment. And it invites us to be more thoughtful, more um, deeply connected to one another during this period of time, even though Mars is upsetting, things as he goes along. So we're being asked to focus on the bigger picture, even though right now it's hard because we can't really see in the midst of all the changes that are occurring. Practice mindful communication with one another. Be sure that you're there when you're talking to someone and that you're not thinking or off somewhere else in your mind while you're having a conversation. Be mindfully listening as well. Ground intuition with practicality, balance idealism and realism. This is a time that like no other that we are living through. And I think sometimes we just have to appreciate the fact that we are here and we are alive during this period of time. All right. And lastly, we won't have too much time to deal with this one, but Mercury moves into Capricorn later this week on Wednesday, the 8th. And this is a move into Capricornia. If we want to reimagine this whole process of these feminine signs and what they represent, think about Mercury, the messenger planet, moving into a sign that we think of as pragmatic and goal oriented, but also creating more of the nurturing of what could be the seeds of the future, right? The ideas of the future, being sustainable on the planet, right? The sustainability of our very ground beneath our feet. Um, we as people, when Mercury is in Capricorn, become much more interested perhaps in facts, in logic, and in the bottom line. Like, tell me, what does this mean at the very bottom line? And we have a tendency to approach conversations in a more structured way, having a purpose in the conversation, right? We may become more persuasive during Mercury's transit through Capricorn, being able to put words and ideas and meanings together in a way that really impacts others. We may take on a more authoritative tone during this period of time. Now, that could be good or bad, right? You don't want to get bossy and obnoxious about what you're saying, but you want to speak through the tone of a leader, being the leader of your own life, right? You can have an overly serious mind and tone to your communication during that period of time, with an overemphasis on logic, maybe a fear of failure, because Capricorn energy is very much about success. But Capricornia sees every action as a move on the chessboard that is leading us to more wisdom and more knowledge. And even if it is a failure, not to look at it as something doom and gloom or to be afraid of failing, but to step forward, right? Don't let it stifle your creativity. So, strategic planning may be an opportunity for growth during Mercury's transit here. Refining your communication, being more factual, being more sure of what it is that you are communicating, building trust through responsibility, I hope that you guys can trust that I'm being responsible in delivering information to you. And, just be clear and direct. This is the time for us to really bring truth forward, right? We had the truth gathering in Sagittarius, but now when he moves to Capricorn, it's the delivery of said truth. And of course, energy for productivity increases, but that might also be a little bit stymied because of Mars still in retrograde. So, the shift from Mercury in Sag to Mercury in Capricorn marks a move from that expansive big thinking to focused, actionable planning, right? The communication being much more direct. And it's a chance for us to ground ideas into some form of reality, making the plan more strategic. All right. It's 9 o'clock already. So thank you all. I'm going to draw us a card. I'm going to take the time to do that. And I'm going to do it from a deck that I recently got called Soul Coaching by Denise Lynn. And I think we could all use some soul coaching in this time of trials, tribulations, excitement. Because I do feel the excitement too, right? The optimism. Remember when we did the astrology of 2025 and we talked about one of the themes from the new year, which is actually March 20th, was excitement and optimism. So to me, that is that is delightful. We get the card delight, delight. So let's read about what that means. So delight is card 14, which is a 5, which in numerology, the 14 is really about the constructive use of freedom, right? So let's see here. The card meaning: clap your hands with joy and let your inner child play. Be silly or play hooky and take a day off. This isn't the time to buckle down and get to work. This is when you should be madcap and spontaneous. Have fun to a certain degree, right? Your soul wants you to know that your spirit guardians are delighted when you're filled with childlike wonder, joy, and exuberance. When just one person experiences true delight, this joyous energy radiates outward like ripples in a pool, reaching even the farthest shores of humanity. Your pleasure can rejuvenate you and can have a powerful healing effect on others. And the affirmation for this time is: I delight in everything in my world, and divine joy fills me. So, just take a look at this card. It feels good, doesn't it? Delight is the card for the week. All right. That is it for me today, guys. I will see you on Friday, where we'll talk about the shift of the North and the South nodes from Aries and Libra into Pisces and Virgo. That's it for me. Bye for now.